Welcome to today's event. Welcome to DMU as well. This is DMU TV Studio. Just a couple of health and safety points. If we haven't got a fire alarm booked today, so if you hear a fire alarm, run. No, if you hear a fire alarm, come with us and we'll guide you out the building very safely. And please make sure you bring everything with you unless you need to go out the room to get it. Otherwise, we are streaming live today, so everything that is said will be streamed live. So please mind your Q's and P's / no too aggressive swearing, as we will be going broadcast everything live. Otherwise, I'll pass it over to you guys and have a fantastic talk.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
That's what we like.
Hello, everyone. This feels like a very formal setup, but we're going to chat back and forth and keep it as kind of conversational as we want it to be as well, if not just to make us feel more comfortable as well. Welcome. So this talk is about how to get paid in comedy. You'll probably be aware there is no hard and fast answer to that. So as we kind of go through and talk about kind of equity and the advice and the kind of formal sides of contracting in comedy, if there are any questions or anything that comes up, please do just shout at me, ask any questions and have a chat. So like I said, this is an equity event. We're at Leicester Comedy Festival every year. We go around and speak to performers, speak to members, speak to new performers about joining equity. My name is Nick, and this is my colleague Fiona. This is probably our first experience like this in a television studio. Equity, how to get paid in comedy. I'm going to do this very fancy transition on the slide. So my role within equity is the variety organizer, which means as well as comedy, I am also responsible for any kind of gigging worker. So that is cabaret, drag, comedy, circus, variety, anything under that bracket. The reason why we kind of like it's divided like that is because variety artists are genuinely gigging performers, and that is kind of maybe something we'll touch on it because it affects kind of your legal position with contracts and in the workplace. Equity is obviously known for being a union for traditional theatre and actors as well, but they tend to be in contracts with rehearsal periods where they are officially a worker and they're not just. So the definition of a variety gig performer, it tends to be like actors known, whether that's a comedy act or a cabaret act. You are a sole trader worker, but you're also selling a product. So the legal structure of how you chase payment in these worst case scenarios, it is different and there are different protections, but we will get into that a little bit more. Fiona, say hello. Say what you do in the union. I'm sorry.
I'm Fiona. I am an organiser in Equity, the trade union, and I go around different workplaces to see members and non-members who are working. And sometimes you will talk to people who are maybe just starting out in the career in comedy or in any area, and sometimes they might have been really early career in what they're setting out to do, and they might not always feel like they're a worker. So sometimes that's a conversation we have with people, is that you are entitled to certain fairness and fair provisions that the trade union sticks together and fights for as well. I do student talks, and I when I do student talks, it's maybe a little bit about explaining what a trade union is, why we still need a trade union, where we're here, why we're not in the past anymore, we're not in the one workplace, but we are together and we are one industry, and the struggle remains the same, the struggle for pay, the struggle for terms and conditions, and health and safety and rights at work and dignity at work are things that still remain current today, and these are things I talk about when I do my workplace visits. So I cover the North East, Yorkshire and Humber. But I'm here in the Midlands today and delighted to be here in Leicester. So I go and see members at work, whether you're in a club, whether you're in a theatre show, whether you're on a TV set. or any workplace that you can think of. Wrestlers can be parts of equity. So that's the part of the job that I do. Go and talk to members, non-members, talk about what the union is. Some people don't know what a trade union is and why we still have them. And we discuss what member benefits you get as an individual, but also what collectively the union does, which we are going to go further into that, where it's the collective power that you do have with a stronger voice sticking together.
Yeah, that is a perfect segue into... So, equity, what is equity? It is the Union for Comedians, as you might have seen in some of the lovely posters around some of the venues at the festival. But yeah, as Fiona was saying, so the nitty-gritty, what is equity? It is 50,000 performers, members who are actors, singers, dancers, circus performers, stage managers, designers, directors, and that includes comedians. One of the key things that I always say is what is a union is, I think the best way of kind of looking at it is that we are not a subsidized professional entity. We are literally a large-scale group of individuals who come together with a common goal. We don't have wealthy donors, we don't have a wealthy board of people influencing the work we do. The reason equity exists and any other trade union exists is because a group of people decide that they want it to exist and they want to improve the industry and they want to rebalance the power of kind of worker and capital. So it is kind of one of those unique things that we kind of put in this position where we feel powerless in the workplace, and the purpose of equity in this group is to be an antidote to that. Equity has been around since 1930. Very famously, the Variety Artists Federation is kind of the source of the predates equity, and equity merged with the Variety Artists. So Variety Artists were a lot more radical and organising much longer before the actors were. We have a kind of another workshop that we do that should advertise, that is like the radical history of equity, that talks about the music hall strikes and the strikes of the performers during the when the industry was based on railway stations, and performers in venues would gig around and travel around, that was based on that infrastructure. And famously, the union that existed before the RMT, so the railway union, famously helped our members who were on strike and gave them free travel when they were on strike, trying to get better terms and conditions in those venues. But that is a talk for another day.
Dead interested.
There is a very kind of broad and fascinating, interesting to the union, and I always find it fascinating that kind of history and trying to bring it into the present and relevant to people's working lives today. So today, yes, the union incorporates actors, entertainers, and creatives. A big kind of structure of what we do now is based on equity agreements and collective bargaining. That covers kind of minimum rates, minimum terms and conditions, and it covers theatre, opera and ballet, television, and film. And collective bargaining means that we can get the best possible terms and conditions. Now, the difference between that and comedy is very much what I touched upon earlier on, is that the law sees you as a sole entity and a sole trader, and it does very much kind of restrict the union laws restrict the collective bargaining that we can do on your behalf. So what we're going to focus on a little bit more today is about what protections you do have, how do we put those contracts in place, and how do we find power for workers in those contracts where the laws are not as robust as they are in other areas. So let's see what we've got on here. Oh, so yeah, before we get to that, let's talk a little bit more about reasons to be part of equity and what structures we have in place that people can get involved with. I've gone a bit too far there. So the Comedians Network was established several years ago by a group of comedians who'd been having difficulty with a particular promoter. And that is kind of reflective very much of all of the kind of union structures that we have in the union. They tend to start from somewhere, people feeling like they've been treated unfairly and they want to do something about it. And that's turned into a structure to kind of organise and improve terms and conditions more broadly beyond just that one individual scenario. The network meets regularly to discuss industry issues, including Edinburgh Fringe and other festivals, as well as look at problems with fees and unscrupulous operators. We regularly assist comedian members to recover unpaid fees or assist with cancellations. Public liability insurance is often required just to perform in a venue. It's generally the first thing I say is that you shouldn't really be, for your own safety, working with the public if you don't have that liability insurance, because you just don't know what's going to happen. Accident insurance comes as standard with an equity membership. So if you have an accident at work while travelling, rehearsing, auditioning or training, you get there is a standard payout of £300 a week to tide you over while you can no longer work. So there is a whole kind of layer of professional insurances that are tailored specifically to the industry that we were only able to afford because we are a group of 50,000 people. But it is very important to have those protections in place, even if you never have to use them. There is also backstage insurance cover, which covers your work possessions that you need to take to work in case of theft or damage. And the Comedians Charter is something that is on the screen there. That came with the network a couple of years ago, and it's something that venues can sign up to that is a marker of best practice. So what it means is that they have in place a dignity at work policy, which would otherwise be, the law wouldn't require it, and most venues will book you in a very informal way, and you will go into the venue and have no idea if the health and safety policy exists, if you're likely to be confronted with proper changing facilities. Harassment in nightlife spaces is not uncommon at all. But when people sign up to a Comedians Charter, they are committing to a dignity at work policy for people who are otherwise completely self-employed, as we've said. So if there are any venue owners in the audience, please do come and talk to us afterwards if you want to sign up to that. It's something that we also encourage members to ask for in the workplace as well. A big part of what the union is that, like I said, the policies and the campaigns are led by members. So if people want to see a workplace improve, it's not a case of just writing to your equity member of staff and saying, can you do this? We rely on people in the workplace to make the change.
I think as well, when I'm talking to people about being part of the union, I often kind of describe it as having somebody kind of on your side. It can be really challenging to put together a portfolio career. You're balancing things that you might not have had to do if you've had a different job before, or if you're starting out on a new career. And those very tangible things that Nick's gone through there about your accident insurance, your backstage cover, your public liability, that is just so important to know that you've got that real technical expertise on your side as well. We have a dedicated team who support with tax and social security as well. So you've got someone in your pocket, like a friend at work, somebody really knowledgeable. I always say there's no daft questions. You can give us a call if there's something that you're unsure about, or if you've seen something that's a bit of a red flag. Particularly if you're faced with a situation that you're feeling alone. You're never alone when you've got the power of the union behind you as well. So I think that is something. I sound cheesy. I am cheesy. We happen to mean it as well. So I think that's just something when we're having conversations with members, just to really show that you can have someone on your side.
Absolutely, and so that is equity. That is what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I'd say, any comedians, whether they're kind of watching back on this or from the live stream or in the room, if anybody has queries about how they can get more involved and come along to Comedians Network meetings, do get in touch with us. We'll leave contact details as well. Which means we're going to move on to the exciting part, the nitty-gritty, and talk about contract. So this is like the comedy specific stuff about how it normally works and what to expect, what are the pitfalls. So it is going to be quite contract specific. So if there are specific questions that come up, like I said, do just wave at me. How many slides have I got there? There we go, okay. So getting into comedy, there's never been a definitive route into comedy, the one way or the other. Traditionally, comedians were often singers or worked in pubs and clubs and did some jokes in between songs. There is a lot of obviously detail about how it developed as its own kind of entity on its own, and how it developed into longer comedy routines in the pubs and clubs. Alternative comedy developed in the 1980s or thereabouts and led to lineups of comedians doing about 10 minutes. The standard set for Edinburgh Fringe is about an hour, with a bit of time each side for get in and get out. That can tend to be a really tight get in and out, and during the August season, a lot of our kind of queries are about that process and how it works and people getting the best kind of deal and not getting exploited. So that is a very common thing for comedians. Not only the finances, because the finances of Edinburgh are notoriously difficult and a big risk, but the actual kind of professionalism of those venues, and it is really important if you're taking that financial risk when you do go up to Edinburgh. So comedians often travel together, sometimes to do out-of-town comedy clubs, say if they're all based in the same city and can be booked together. Comedians also often work as promoters as well as doing their own spot or comparing. They also set up their own clubs and club nights. So that is also the unique part and the crossover of being a worker but also a promoter. And we kind of navigate the nuance of that in a way that other unions don't. So all of our members are freelancers, and it does make it complicated, but yeah, it's tends to be quite a specific thing to variety and gigging performers. So comedy courses can be very popular. It also gives you access to a student and graduate membership if you were to join the union. Students on professional short courses, yeah, they get a significantly discounted rate, and I think it's for within the past, if you've been on it for the past 2 years and you didn't realise that you could access it. But it's worth checking the website for the full details of that. But other formats such as, so bringers, where comedian has to sell a certain number of tickets or bring people, I think we talk about that a little bit later, but they are quite common and they're not always the best deal for the comedian. It's not something we generally encourage people to agree to. Competitions can often have the same burden on ticket sales, bringing an audience, and the prize may not be worth winning. So I'm sure you all know that much better than I do as well. If I'm moving on to the next, oh my goodness. The
transition to something else, yeah.
What is a contract? So I think I've got a couple of clicks on here. Let me just get them all up before I start chatting. Okay. Okay, so the main section of this talk is about contracts. So what is, and how you ensure that you are going to get paid. Firstly, it is useful to go back to basics and look at what a contract actually is. So agreeing the fundamental points with intention on both sides. A contract has to be a two-sided agreement. It's not, if it's just one person offering a performance with no payment, nothing in return, that is not a legal contract. There has to be something in return. So the general process, like I mentioned before, whether you've got a formal piece of paper, we have templates that gigging workers can use. It's called the Actors Known Contract. A lot of people use that within the industry, whether it's comedy or other sectors, but it is obviously very common that the most contracts that we deal with are an agreement in a WhatsApp chat or even an Instagram chat.
Yeah, Facebook.
And that is just as legally binding as any formal written contract. So for it to be a binding contract, like I said, there has to be offer and acceptance with that intention to form the legally binding relationship. And after this agreement, both sides are committed. Does it all need to be written down? What slide am I on? Here we go, offer and acceptance. Intention on both sides. Does it all need to be written down? Legally, no. Yeah. So yes, in practice, a verbal agreement is legally binding, but in reality, how do you prove that you have a verbal agreement? The advice is just to treat it as if all of the terms, if you have it in writing, whatever the format, that is how you prove a legally binding contract. Yeah, so the rules for that clearly span further back from when anyone imagined WhatsApp or Instagram existed. So that is just the reality that we have today, and it is, like I said, when we do have legal cases or money claims, they're almost always based on screenshots from a WhatsApp chat.
You can sometimes do an email back to people and say, we talked about this. This was X, you said this and I said this. So I do sometimes say to people, look, if you have a verbal conversation with someone, chuck it in an email or a WhatsApp so you can say, this is what you said, this is what I said, and this is what we agreed. And then you'll hopefully have some sort of a trail to help you with that.
Confirming terms of a previous conversation even. Yeah, there's a question.
Is it okay if I record the conversation with their consent, obviously?
Well, I was going to say that's another question. So if you have consent, yes. I think in reality that's quite a hard kind of scenario to bring around, because they would probably ask you why. If you're having recording without consent, that's generally not, as far as I'm aware, that's not admissible in these situations. So yeah, it's less common that we get a scenario where someone's recorded the conversation, but yeah.
Sometimes members say they've recorded conversations and we say, sorry, it can't be used.
Probably shouldn't have done that.
Probably shouldn't have done that. Always get consent before you record anybody doing anything.
One interesting thing, so you were talking about confirming the terms. One interesting thing we talk about is that sometimes people who do use the formal contract, there will generally be a cancellation clause so that everybody knows what the terms are if it gets cancelled. Now, there are pros and cons on both sides for using a formal contract or not using a formal contract, and then cancellation is the perfect example of that, because if you don't pre-agree a cancellation clause, then cancellation can only be by mutual agreement. Often the venue will think, oh, I can cancel a week before or a day before and I don't owe you anything, but that is absolutely not true. If you're booked and it's a very busy period of time and they've booked you 6 months in advance, you have a right to go and find other work. If you've blocked that out and that you have the terms of the agreement and you've blocked that out, it's not something that the venue can just turn around and say, oh, I've realised I've got my dates mixed up and we don't need you anymore. That is a scenario where we can take a money claim, and actually the balance of power in that scenario is often more on our side if you don't have a cancellation policy sometimes, which is...
We see a lot of that with members who have had something booked through Facebook and then they say, oh, I've sold no tickets for this, so it's cancelled, and say, well, we're still entitled to go forward to retrieve some of that because you could have found other work.
Absolutely. So, how to make sure you get paid. Some things you should also remember when making a contract. So, who the individual person or company is and where they can physically be found is essential information if it comes to taking county court action. To prevent misunderstanding, it should be agreed that the type of contractual arrangement, so the fee, is it a profit share or is it a free gig? When the payment will be made and how. But it's also worth employing due diligence to check any kind of negatives online. There could be bad payment history that we live in a society where there's a lot of reviews of venues, and sometimes just doing that research before getting mixed up in it is worth doing.
Getting the actual name of the company as well. Sometimes you need to get that off Companies House, just to make sure that you've got the right person who you are going to be approaching for the invoice or for the fee, because often after the fact, the people might come to us and say, oh, I've been implied by the name of a bar, and that might have a different trading name through the Companies House. So it's just a little bit of extra due diligence to make sure. It sounds like a lot of life admin, but it does help you with that worst case scenario.
Absolutely, it's like I said, it's the nitty gritty, and you don't necessarily know you're going to need this information until you're in that worst case scenario that is very stressful. So what type of business is it is another thing to consider. An individual may trade under a name such as Market Harbour Comedy Club, but that business may not even be incorporated. While this means that they are liable for any fees as an individual, you may not know that their address. So don't assume that the comedy club's address is where the liable party to the contract is. An incorporated company, like Fiona said, can be found on Companies House. An individual could hire a space in a local pub and call it a comedy club, but the pub itself may not be liable for the comedian's fee. So a pub could organise a regular comedy night, and in that scenario would be liable. A club may be owned by a member, such as a member group, such as a working men's club. So all of those different scenarios is a kind of different aspect or concept of liability. And I would say if you're also booking and putting on nights, the importance of doing that as a limited company and not as an individual protects you as well, because that is a lot of kind of crossover in comedians making work for themselves and other people, but having a limited company is best practice in those scenarios, absolutely. So what type of deal is it? Have I gone through all? Yeah. So we talked a little bit about bringer gigs. So the types of fees, simplest is just being paid an agreed fee, say £100 for the spot. Profit share is where proceeds of ticket sales or bar profit are split between comedians in an agreed format. I think relying on kind of a budget scenario where the bar is where the money is being made is a lot more common these days now. But that in itself makes it much less clear how that profit share is actually functioning. It may not be clear what is being deducted from the revenue before that profit is declared. So you have to be really careful with those scenarios that sound perfectly kind of fair and reasonable on the surface, but how is that being managed and calculated? Comedians also may not have access to the books, like I said, so to see what's been raised. Not being paid at all, particularly from an equity perspective, it should only be an occasional short-term or one-off situation where the comedian decides that they want to do it. Reasons being for specific festival slots, exposure, is one of those kind of buzzwords that make us wince a little bit, but we are aware that it is a reality of the industry, and so many people spend the first few years of their career finding those opportunities to get a name. But in an ideal world, an exposure gig would not exist. It would be a fairer split, but.
I think as well, if there's a group of you who are getting together to get a show on, then that's a different situation, isn't it? If you're all going to just see what happens, you're going to make something happen. As a group of people who would just do that for the exposure, for the experience of doing it. As soon as somebody starts making money off what you're doing and what you're bringing into a venue and what your people are ultimately coming to see you, then I think that's when you must, I would always say you want to make sure that you're not at risk of getting exploited and making sure that you're getting something tangible for the time and your professionalism and the work that you've put in. Exposure doesn't pay the rent, but we do know it is part of the infrastructure often.
And I think that's important to say for competitions as well, given how many competitions there are now as well. It just requires due diligence in weighing up the benefits for you, because there are actually a lot of very good competitions out there and people who can go to Edinburgh and get their entire stay covered, and that will support their show as well as like doing the competition or the best of compilation or all of this stuff. So it would be a bit too blunt for us to come and say that not to do them, but it's just about knowing where your boundaries are, what is the prize, what are you getting out of it, and just being sensible. So yeah, like I said, we, as well as doing the nitty-gritty contract advice, we talk about these kind of arrangements and have conversations with people on a daily basis as well. So always get in touch with your union if you're not sure about competitions or profit shares as well. Payment terms. So cash on the night, bank transfer on the night, payment on invoice, payment through agent. Whoops, gone too far. So yeah, these are the most common forms of payment. In a best practice scenario, we sometimes, particularly if it's a busy time of year, we also ask people about whether you want to have kind of some deposit scheme so that you accept a deposit so that you can't be cancelled at the last minute. I'm aware that it is uncommon, but it is like sometimes best practice, particularly if you know that you could get multiple other gigs that night and you're committing to this one. Asking for 50% upfront is not an unreasonable ask, in my opinion, even if it's not that common. Right. Payment on invoice. The legal position on payment on invoice is a maximum of 30 days. Some people will try and push that longer than 30 days. Some people will be very good and pay within 7 days or 14 days. But the actual legal protection you get, if we were to pursue it, it is 30 days. So that works both ways. So if the contract says it would be longer, there is a scenario where a court would still see the reasonable side of it being 30 days. So even if you've signed something, it's not necessarily a binding scenario. Oh, there we go. See, I'm preempting the slides here. Here we go.
We were just talking to a person who's starting out in the industry, and they were saying that they were waiting for invoices for months and months and months. It's not okay. The law's on your side. You know, it shouldn't be later than 30 days, but we know in reality it often is. But we're here in those scenarios as well to assist. It's
a sad fact that it is more and more common that people get strung along in the hope that the venue will somehow find another income stream to be able to pay off invoices and debts. And in my experience, it never really ends in a good scenario. So payment on time is just good practice, professional practice, and believing a booker or a venue that says, oh, next month, it's not worth your time sometimes, because it can drag on and on and on.
We've got a question.
Oh yes, yeah.
What would be the expected scenario that you've been paid? It's 30 days. You still haven't been paid. At what point do you take them to small claims court, or would you recommend not? Or what would be the sort of the next step that you would recommend?
Fab. Yeah, that's a great question. We're the first point of contact.
Yep.
And as a union, Equity emailing or calling up a venue has its own kind of sway sometimes, I'd like to say. I mean,
definitely.
People know the union, and they know that if the union is pursuing a money claim, that it's not a bluff. We have the kind of the means and the infrastructure to do that, and very often the best scenario of that outcome is that they would realise that, and they would pay before needing to do it. That is probably the most common outcome, and that is a result of the collective power we have, and probably the most common example of that.
Often members will have already had quite an awkward conversation, or they've had awkward emails back and forward about waiting for invoices past that 30 days. So it does add another layer into that, where we can say we're the trade union representing this member, and that sometimes it's little more than an email or a phone call sometimes that will progress that. And we will often have a conversation with a member as to the chances of success. And if a company's gone under, for example, not to get too much into those terrible scenarios, but you come to the point with the member and you agree the next steps with the member. And if the member comes to us and says, oh, I'm having a time with this booker, but I don't know whether I want to approach them, we don't take steps without members knowing fully what those steps will be. So I always reassure people, because sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to end up on some sort of list if I raise this further, but we can sometimes remove the member from that a little bit and take that forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we always encourage people to contact us as soon as possible, and then it's a kind of case by case of how we'd navigate that. But,
yeah. So once we've done that phone call or email, then we'll do a letter. We'll do a first letter, proceed through there. And often the money does come through after one letter. I had one the other week for somebody who was performing in a care home, and the care home terms had said 90 days for invoices. I'm like, well, that's a red flag because actually, you know, it should be 30 days in the law. So every time we speak to members, we feels like we are demonstrating more how we can help. But yeah, sometimes it is that letter, sometimes it's a second letter, and then it can progress through to small claims. And we take that. It's a lot of life admin. It's a lot of stress on someone who's trying to put together a career and try and go off and perform. So that's a real positive that we can do that real, as you were saying, nitty gritty of that.
Mm-hmm. On the late payment, I'm just going to check where I am in the slides. No, I've gone too far. So if payment is late, one of the questions we had, wait, did we talk about this? Sorry. We were speaking to someone earlier on about charging fees for late payment. There was, a kind of misconception that if you put it in the invoice, the day that it's late, all of a sudden I can charge £100 late fee. And as much as I'd love that to be true, it's not true. There are fees. It is £40 plus 12.75% per annum. But putting that in on the invoice or putting £100 on the invoice, sadly, it doesn't change anything. It tends to be only something that we can put into practice when it goes to a county court. So in reality, it's better for us to just use the union, chase them, put pressure on them. Threats of £100 late fees rarely are enforceable. If it were to come to a court, you charge a percentage for each day that it's late, but it is kind of tends for a £200 gig. That tends to be small amounts plus a £40 processing fee. Yes.
So there were a couple of options to get paid. So if I am an upcoming, even if I'm not with Equity, which one would you recommend me taking as a payment option? Would it be cash or night, or even though an invoice has a lot of legal nitty-gritty, I feel like it's still the safest option? Or would it be, what was the last one? I believe there was one more that I've not mentioned.
Or like a bank transfer or a...
Yeah, I think it was a bank transfer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever makes sense to you. I think you, in a way, you answered the question that the kind of the paper trail is a bit more clear if there's a formal invoice. We, in some of the equity agreements we use in different scenarios, we kind of lay out everything that should be on the invoice for people as well. That is available on the website for people who haven't done it before. But yeah, it's the most formal way of doing it and sets out a clear time frame of when you submitted the invoice and where the 30 days starts. So it's probably a bit safer. But
there's been members who said they were going to be, not to scaremonger or anything, but they said they're going to get cash on the night, and then they say, I'll do a bank transfer instead of cash, and then 3, 5, 10, 30 days later they've had no sign of the cash on the bank transfer or anything. And that is that people come to us with those because they're trusting, and they say, I know this place, I go in this bar, I know they're good for the cash. But then they kind of sometimes, they can turn it around and go, I'll just do a bank transfer. So we would recommend having things written down to a point. But again, it's up to yourself how formal you would want to go, but you are more covered when you are more formal.
Absolutely. Right, what have we got? How to get it in writing. Oh, another fancy transition. So there's lots of different ways to capture what you are agreeing in writing. So I think this is probably in order of security. So a written contract is always kind of the most secure process. Oh my goodness.
That's the one with caution. That's why it's bouncing.
It's a bouncing check.
Exactly, it's a bouncing check.
Like I've said, the only thing to consider with that is the cancellation, but otherwise everything else, it does tend to be better to have everything kind of written out and formal and protects both parties. Chain of emails would be the next best thing. As we mentioned before, WhatsApp or similar can be absolutely fine, and it is legally binding. Website booking form or app, not one that I have come across that much, but I think it is more common sometimes now. People finding work through specific apps as well. I'm not sure if anybody has had any experience with the apps.
There's several apps now
Which app do you
We've got a
use?
microphone making its way to you, just so we can hear you.
There's a number of apps that are GigGag is one that's
Oh,
popular,
yeah,
and there's Confirm.show, and I've actually built my own one as well for
amazing.
for our nights. So yeah, and then I've met several people now who also. So I think there's several more coming on stream as we speak.
Ah, interesting. And it just kind of like formalizes the kind of the back and forth, or matches people with venues.
Yeah, and so you can basically see dates, and you can apply, and then you can receive like a notification that you've been selected, and that can come through an app ping, or it might come through an email. Actually, our one that we've done, it leaves an email trail for
great.
everything, which I think is a good feature.
Makes sense.
But yeah, there's all sorts basically.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So, and then the last one says, obviously, Facebook social media with caution, although I would probably, equate it with WhatsApp or similar, because we get so many Instagram conversations these days as well, but that's absolutely fine as well. And here we have an example of said WhatsApp conversation that you're likely to come across.
Big laughs in Croydon, yeah.
So there we go. We've got the date and the time. There is confirmation of like how much, and then there's an agreement. So yeah, and then there's confirmation. So this is an example of a binding scenario where the gig has been agreed. And that is essentially all you really need to have a formal contract. What can go wrong? Oh, there's going to be a lot of clicks.
Oh,
on this
yeah,
one.
there is.
Okay. So I think
Heard them all.
so. Yeah, cancellation, no show by the comedian or late show by the comedian, pandemic. It's only happened once before so far, but touch wood. Monarch dying, royal demise, weather warning.
Royal demise, wow. That's 2019.
I was performing that night.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you get paid?
No. It was a free gig, but they were very clear that we were not to make any jokes about the Queen.
Wow.
Wow. So it did go ahead though,
Censorship.
right?
Yeah, and I made jokes about the Queen, so
Oh, yeah. Quite the power.
Weather warnings, here we go. You missed the bus, club goes bust. Also not uncommon these days, sadly. You offend the client.
We had one where someone drove to the wrong town name. They went to the completely different side of Yorkshire, to a different town name. That was an interesting conversation, because they'd gone to the wrong place.
And some of these scenarios would be in the force majeure part of a contract if you have your own contract. Without that, it does make it a much more of a kind of grey area. So again, get in touch with Equity or with your rep, because it can be a really awkward situation for everyone in these scenarios. So what can you do about it? If you're a member, call Equity. There we go. That was it. That's the answer. So as we've gone through, it's always best to collect the necessary information at the contracting process. We rarely get the opportunity to speak to people about this level of detail before they get into that contract place. So doing your due diligence, getting the information that you need to feel confident to do that gig is always the important thing. And otherwise, calling Equity for advice.
I think as well, people who aren't members, we can have a phone call. Often we wouldn't be able to take down a legal route, but I've people who've rang me who haven't been members, and I've been able to kind of say, do you have this in place? Do you have this, and this? Ultimately, it's your decision whether you decide to be a part of the union, but we're always there when the chips are down, not to stay on when things go wrong. But it is an unfortunate reality, but we can be there for when you're looking at contracts. Even if you're being sent contracts that you want us to have a look at, we can definitely support with that. We would give you the idea of any red flags or any green flags, in fact, share best practice. But we certainly, it's always wise to have that protection just for when that happens, because we can't proceed, even if you ring us up and say, oh, well, I'll join. That's not a situation we can continue with legally. Sometimes people think, oh, well, I'm not a member, but I'll quickly join the union. So I think it's just wise to have that protection.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I was going to mention or end on before we go to questions, if there are any questions, is just to talk a little bit about the campaigning element. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the kind of the nitty-gritty, and happy to take any really specific questions if you have them. But so I think maybe I mentioned about the Comedians Network, but I didn't talk at the beginning about the kind of the democratic structure and how we decide what campaigns Equity does, and like, because we have, as we said, we have a fair amount of sway to be able to talk about beyond just those one-to-one interactions and the individual things. We want to be talking about viable careers as well as those individual situations. So the Variety Committee is part of the democratic structure of the union. It's where comedians get involved at a further step if they've been to a few network meetings and they want to put themselves forward. Our entire union is run through that democratic structure. So the campaigns we run, the policy that we decide on is member-led. It is run by those committees. So if people have things that they want to get involved with, that is how you do it. We are members of staff, but we are informed by that structure. And a good example of that is, so if I'm talking specifically about London, we've very recently done a nightlife pay audit because there is a deemed kind of crisis in the nightlife in London in terms of not only viable careers, but viable kind of gigs, viable venues closing down, the cost of living. And the GLA Nightlife Task Force is commissioning this piece of work. But unfortunately, they excluded any unions or workers from that task force. So the plight of comedians earning a viable career was completely excluded from that. So we did our own pay audit, and we've been pestering them. The committee's been pestering them to get on an advisory panel. But that is kind of an example of ways that we also kind of scale up the work. We're there to support you in these like individual one-to-one scenarios, but also saying how can the industry be better? How should it be better, knowing that there is a whole nighttime economy where someone's getting paid, but is the performer getting paid? Is it a scenario where someone who is very popular, very like working, can be doing that, working regularly, but still not earning a viable career? And these are important questions that we also need to talk about as well.
I think when we can create sets of guidelines and sets of, that the Comedians Charter, and particularly in other areas of variety, we've got cabaret and burlesque, and how can members group together to make it more fair and better for other members? How can we help people? And we do that through workplace visits, through committees, through our democratic structures, through our branch structures as well. So I always kind of say it's do a bit of a shout out to get involved, switch on a bit to kind of union activism, get involved, come along to some branches or committees, and have it. It is great to feel a sense of a network, and it can often lead to great connections that you make further down the line through work perhaps as well, but it can help you feel like, yeah, we're all in this together.
Yeah. I feel like there's, in comedy specifically, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there is also like a certain amount of culture that you will work and push with the goal of getting TV or something high profile, and that's where the money is. And anything up to that, people use it as an excuse to put up with a lot of bad behaviour and unprofessional working scenarios. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, as well as the insurance and the contracts, we want to be empowering members to organise and have a meaningful impact on the industry through their union as well. So, from our side, we have come to the end and wrapped up our elaborate presentation. So, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Yeah.
So I have got a question. I just feel really bad that I didn't mention the name of our company that's doing our app, which is Hilarity Unlimited UK. Please check us on Instagram. Come and sign up for our gigs. You had me at Public Liability Insurance. Can I now just sign up on the phone? If I wanted to sign up now?
I can sign you up on the spot. Talk to me afterwards.
I will look forward to that. Thank you so much.
As soon as you sign up as well, you get the PDF, isn't it? It's right there.
Yeah. So you start using the liability from the get-go.
Yeah.
One more question. 2 questions.
Oh, great.
Go for it.
Okay, so the first question is because you guys do not only do comedians, you have other creators as well as like in media and everything. Would you guys be what's the word? Be available to help collaborate with some of these people? So let's say I want to do my own like social media comedy thing, and let's say I want to get in touch with somebody that's done something to do with media, camera work. Would you guys be able to connect me to somebody that does something like that, either experienced or up and coming just like me?
So, as a union, we're often seen as like an industry body, and we get questions like that fairly often. Some people ask whether we do like casting or other professional services like that. It tends to be something that we don't get involved with. The industry runs themselves, and that kind of collaboration, and I would say generally as a union, that's not really our role in the industry. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I would say we wouldn't be able to kind of say, oh, we can put you in contact with X person who can do this, but whilst it's not inside the formal structures, you will be able to kind of find, if you get involved, I'm doing my shout out again, come along and meet people, and there'll be somebody who can kind of help you with different things to do, but it's not formally, we don't recommend you as part of the union. But I think if you meet like-minded people who are in the industry, inevitably that's something that you can chat to people about, but it's not part of our formal work.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there another question?
Yeah, and the second one is somebody in the audience mentioned how they were told not to make jokes about the Queen, but they did anyways. But in general, in terms of comedy, do you think that people should be more free about what they make jokes about, or should they be topics they should stay far, far away from?
That is a tricky
It's a
question.
tricky one. It's art at the end of the day, but yeah, it's polite society as well. I think you've got to draw the line somewhere, haven't you?
I think
Don't know.
at the end of the day, those nuanced questions, there's always going to be different opinions, but equity will always be on the side of our members,
Yeah.
regardless. Obviously, there are many scenarios in comedy of situations like that. I know a member. Well, no, maybe I shouldn't talk about the specifics.
Little streams finished.
But yeah, specific divisive topics, it's not uncommon, but we do support people in those scenarios. Yeah, sorry, that's a vague, ambiguous answer. I apologise. Yes.
Hiya, I'm Jürgen. I'm a comedian and writer. I was just curious about the process of joining and the rates. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please.
So if you were interested to join, I've got forms I can sign you up on the spot, and then you're protected from the get-go. Most people join by direct debit, and it's £16 a month. Some people want to buy a chunk. You can buy like a 3-month chunk or a 6-month chunk, but most people we would encourage to have it rolling so that you're protected. And if you wanted to go and join after this on your own, you can join on the website. And there is an evidence process of showing. We tend to, there is a professional marker of proving £750 worth of income from the industry that is kind of like a filter process. But when we meet in person at the festival, then that you can bypass that as well. So, yeah. One question at the front.
More questions?
So it's not really it's not really a question for me. It's more of a statement for those in the room of the local branch details. So you can contact them if, for any reason, you don't speak with Nick or today.
Fantastic.
It is East Midlands. Give me 1 second. East Midlands at equitybranches.org.uk, and specifically within comedy representation, you have Tej Dutia and Ishi Khan, who are on the board for that. So they're your local representatives for this industry.
Brilliant.
Amazing shout out, thank you.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
I think that is a perfect note to end on. So yeah, thank you for turning out, and thank you for coming with us through that roller coaster of contracts.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.